I think Supriya, now you can start.
Sure, sir. So you want me to turn on the camera? Is it required?
Yeah, possibly please. If
Sure.
possible,
Sure, sir.
please.
Good evening, everyone. This is Supriya. I welcome you to this webinar on youth as first responder against human trafficking, organized by Changemakers Foundation and Amity Institute of Social Sciences, our knowledge partner, Kalinga Fellowship. We are in conversation with two very notable people, Michael Connor, Client Director, Bridge Americas, and Professor Prashant Chauhan from Faculty of Social Work, Amity University, India. So before we begin our webinar, let me introduce Mike Connor to our audiences. Mike Connor is a client director with Bridge Americas. He leads multiple global accounts and partners closely with the senior executive and their teams. With over 20 years of consulting experience, Mike is able to connect individual leadership development with broader organizational vision and strategy, resulting in leaders and teams that are highly productive and passionate about achieving immediate and long term business results. His approach combined practical knowledge and cutting edge techniques to help leaders, teams, and the organizations to navigate and thrive in times of change and transformation. Mike has partnered with clients across the globe and in a wide range of industries, including consumer packaged goods, technology, finance, food, hospitality, health, healthcare, fashion, and retail. To joining Bridge, Mike was an assistant professor at University's Gordon Institute, where he taught leadership awareness and agility. He also has many years of experience as executive in the healthcare sector and as CEO of a training organization focused on maximizing human potential. Mike holds advanced degree in both healthcare management and practical spirituality and is the author or co-author of at least 5 books. Mike has been happily married for over 25 years and is the proud father of two young adults. And from on behalf of the entire Amity Institute of Social Sciences and Changemakers Foundation, we welcome you, Mike, to this webinar. And now I request Professor Chauhan to reel in and take this conversation further with Mike. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Supriya. Very well, I think, introduction. And Mr. Michael is this introduction is not much, I believe, because what I know about in last few days, few months about him, he's a very dynamic person and engaged in various activities. So today's this session is very very important because we are now going to discuss on very important matter which is where we say that youth as first responders against human trafficking. So as we all know that, and many students know that I'm part of Kalinga Fellowship, and we are working together with the global community on the issue of human trafficking, that how we can work together to curb it, to end it at various levels across the globe. And under this only, this is one of the initiative where we want that youth should come forward and act as a first responder. So what is first responder? What role you can play? There are many things, many questions which we will try to discuss today, and we are looking forward a very active participation from all of you, dear students, those who are part of this conversation, this very important session, that please contribute whatever you wish to, whatever the queries you have, whatever the ideas you have, you share with us, because we are looking out for some innovative ideas also, so that because you all are young minds, you can contribute in a better way what we can do and how we can work together to end human trafficking at various levels. A little bit about Changemakers Club is basically an initiative of Amity University social work students and social sciences students, where they are working primarily on anti-human trafficking initiatives, as well as they are also working on the environmental issues. They are promoting sustainable development goals, through various activities. And this event is also one of the effort in coordination by the members, student members of the Changemakers Club. And I would like to, acknowledge the contribution of Rijo John and Supriya, who just introduced the guest, and many other students, those who are continuously working on a mission to serve the society, to work on a cause. So today, as per the vision of our Honorable Founder President Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, our Chancellor Dr. Atul Chauhan, and our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Balvinder Shukla ma'am, and Director AISS. I would like to welcome Mike today in this very important session, and looking forward on a conclusion where we can discuss more about plans and suggestions we can include, and how we can work together as a team, and the definition of first responders, because this is something where normally students say, what can I do? I'm not much aware about. So what is their role? So today we will discuss that. So thank you so much, Michael, for giving your time. I know that it is the time management is also, it's early morning in US, and then you are joining because of your interest and passion and support. So thank you so much, and welcome to this very important session. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Prashant, and thank you for the kind introduction, Supriya. It really is a pleasure for me to be here with so many young people, and I really appreciate the invitation. To me, one of the things at the very end of my introduction was the fact that I am the father of two young adults. So I have a 21 and a 19-year-old, and they are my teachers. You students, that are on this, you are the future. You're going to lead further into the future than your kind professor or myself. And I oftentimes look to the young people in my life oftentimes to inform me about what I need to know about where the future is going. So I'm thrilled to be here communicating and sharing with you some of our thoughts and some of my thoughts, but I really look to you to be the ones that lead us into the future. I have this belief that you are actually wired as younger people. You're wired internally to go further into the future than I am. And so I oftentimes look to you. I look to you to hold the vision, to inspire me, and to envision a world that is a world that's more just, that's more kind. There's greater equity. There's more peace. There's more joy. There's more prosperity. So it's really a privilege to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. In a moment, I'm going to share. Yeah, we can go ahead, Rijo. Go ahead and start to share some slides. Just want to, before I begin my conversation with Prashant, I'd like to just take you on a bit of a journey. I had the real privilege to connect with your professor on this, what's called the Kalinga Fellowship. He is one of over 100 fellows who are engaged in a fellowship journey over the course of the last 4 or 5 months. We're still involved with it, with people not only across India, but across the world, who are really focused on how can we really look at the whole area of human trafficking from a different perspective and have an even bigger impact. And I'd like to just share a little bit about that journey with you, because I think it'll allow for our conversation, once we get into it, to have more meaning. So Risha, you can go on to the next slide if you would, please. So back one. So one of the things we looked at, Prashant and I were part of one of 5 different streams that made up this year's Kalinga Fellowship journey. And the Kalinga Fellowship is a program, when I was introduced, I am a consultant and a client director for Bridge. Bridge also has a not-for-profit arm. So we have the part that works with large corporations, but we also have what's called the Bridge Institute. And that's our not-for-profit arm. And we use all of our methodologies that we utilize with large corporations to focus on significant societal issues, including human trafficking. And our work in partnership with the Kalinga Institute has been going on for the last 4 years. This year, we're doing it virtually, which allows us actually in many ways to include and connect in ways that we weren't able to before. Prashant and I are in a stream that's around first responders. We also have streams that are related to technology and data, to finance and banking, to policing, to addressing childhood marriage. So we tried to look at the issue of human trafficking across a much wider lens this year in a way that we could really begin to get underneath the challenge and say, how do we address this more effectively? And one of the things we came up was we began to really look at how how systemically what really sits at the heart of this challenge. And just go back for a moment to that first slide, if you would. So I just want to just briefly share that what we noticed is that while the idea of a first responder tends to be thought of as someone who, and it is someone who's in the community, who's closest to those people who are have the potential to being brought into and trafficked in what literally is a multi-billion-dollar industry, we began to see that we really need to address this from the systemic standpoint, that it effectively sits in a system that is really driven by greed and power and fear, and that our response to it needs to be coordinated. And so as we looked at this more deeply, we really looked at how do we create and impact the culture and the broader system in a way through education, through engagement, and through empowering people to be first responders in a way that brings more compassion, human dignity, as well as cooperation. We can move on to the next slide now, please. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but one of the things that we did, and I'm going to invite you into this space with us this morning, is our group, once we began to identify the challenge, I think you all know who Walt Disney was. Walt Disney, you know, and maybe this is dating myself, obviously but in his day, Walt Disney was one of the most creative people there was. And he had the ability, he and his team had the ability to dream dreams and see visions that other people couldn't see. And one of the things that we did on our journey is we went into, Walt Disney had what he called the dream room. And when you went into the dream room, the only thing you could do there was dream. He also had other rooms, so he could take those dreams and he could bring them to life. He had what he called the realist room, and he had the critic room where he'd take the dreams and then build them into models that he could bring into the world. But in the dream room, he allowed anything that was possible to be dreamed. And we collectively in our group around first responders did some dreaming. We began to dream of a world and allow ourselves the possibility of dreaming of a world where compassion and love and humanity were valued more and respect were valued more than maybe some of the greed and some of that power that we're seeing in the system now. We saw a place where we could leverage things like music and art and storytelling and poetry to begin to heal some of these issues we're dealing with, because it's quite interesting. I won't go into it at great length, but a lot of you understand that we have kind of a left brain and a right brain. That our left brain tends to think very logically. It tends to separate things and categorize things. And that can be very effective. It thinks in time. Our right brain, which is more intuitive and sits kind of more in our body, tends to connect things. It's a great connector of life. It connects the dots. And it relates more through things like music and art and poetry and storytelling. And as we began to envision a world that was more connected instead of more separated, we began to think about these are some of the ways we can create some of these connections. We imagined a world where big business and those in power, instead of having power over us, were partners with us in terms of holding a higher purpose and having a greater impact. A place where education could bring awareness of this issue. Because trafficking works when it's in the darkness. Trafficking works, it doesn't want you to see it. It wants to be hidden away. And it's our job to shine the light on it and be aware of it and understand it more effectively. we saw a vision where families and young people were informed and aware and educated so they could address this. So we saw how media and social media could support us on this journey. And we really envisioned a place where we were coming together, connected around this. And what I loved about the final aspect of this vision or dream, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, is we imagined a place where grandparents and parents were telling their kids stories about back in the days when human trafficking was an issue, that we could actually envision a time when maybe we could really address and shift this issue. So you can move on to the next slide. But I'd like you to hold that sense of vision as we move forward, because it really informs us in terms of how we can approach it. I won't go through all these shifts, but one of the things we did then was, here's our vision, here's current reality. What are some of the things that need to shift? And again, you can kind of look through some of these, but a shift from fear, a consciousness of fear, because right now, not only does fear kind of create human trafficking, but it also keeps people from standing up and feeling empowered. We wanted a place, instead of having power over, we want people to feel empowered, that we want to feel like they're resourceful and have the tools to be able to feel empowered to address this. We wanted a place where instead of win-lose, we're playing win-win. We want a commitment to humanity first. We want to move from a place where there's a level of ignorance and even denial of the problem into awareness and accountability. And so I'm not going to go through all of these. We began to look at the shifts of what's the current reality around trafficking, and how can we move more towards this vision or the dream of what we want to move towards. Next slide, please. Then we just came up with some ideas of where we can address this. Education, we'll talk more about that in a moment. How do we create livelihood opportunities for young people? How do we engage people? Involve the media? How do we create protection, law enforcement, leverage the healthcare system? And then how do we collaborate and leverage some of what's currently going on, instead of
Mike, can you just unmute?
I'm sorry, something must have happened. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep us moving. I'm sorry, somehow I went on mute there. Let me move to the next slide, please. So, as we said, we're not going to talk about this idea that really was generated out of the fact that this is a systemic and really a cultural issue, not just in India, but really across the world. And so with that, we came up with this idea that literally everyone across the system can be a first responder. Not only, on the streets or in the villages or in the brothels, but also in the courtrooms and the boardrooms. That students and teachers and social workers and family members and executives and managers and leaders and across all aspects of society can step into becoming a first responder when they are educated to understand the broader issue, when they're engaged, and when they're empowered to do so. Next slide, please. You can move on to the next slide, please. I'm not going to really speak more. I'm actually not going to speak too much more about this. This really just gets more into the essence of what it means to redefining what a first responder is, and recognizing that every one of us has that responsibility. Next slide, please. One of the core components here, and you sit right in this space, is to educate. There's so many of us that are ignorant to human trafficking, and think of it as far away from us, that we don't see it. Since we don't see it in our life, we don't recognize the impact of it. Again, I mentioned it's a $150 billion a year business. And how do we educate people to recognize it's not far away from it? It's not far away from any one of us. And every one of us has a potential to impact it. And so we say education builds awareness. Next slide, please. The next level is engagement. So oftentimes when something feels far away from us, we can think about it, we can even care about it, but we don't feel connected to it enough for us to engage in it. And so one of the ways that we look at engaging people is how do we leverage the stories of survival leaders? How do we connect in a way that it connects to us in a way that we can feel it viscerally, that we can feel some compassion for, that we can get in, that it connects to us in a way that invites us in to be motivated. So engagement moves from we're educated, we become aware, but what's the motivation for us getting involved? Next slide, please. And finally, empowering is giving us the tools so that when we have this awareness and we get engaged in it, well, what can I do? And empowering gives us the tools, the networks, and the opportunities for us to take action. And so as we go through this journey, as we have some of this conversation, we want to be looking at how do we educate? How do we then engage people so it becomes, they can feel it in their body, it becomes real to them in a way that they want to do something? And then how do we give them the tools and the networks and the support to be able to do that? Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through. Here's just some examples of how everyone can be a first responder. A CEO can be a first responder. A government or police official can be a first responder. And we have examples here of different ways. You know, a CEO can literally, or any manager or leader in any organization, public or private, can create a culture and bring in training to help the people throughout the organization to recognize and respond to that. Certainly in the place of policy and police, we can respond to things in terms of shifting policy, but also ensuring that those policies are reinforced. And we found that in the banking industry or in the tech industry, there's ways to begin to recognize how that money, that those billions of dollars, that money has to move through a system. And for this to work, there also not only has to be the supply, i.e. the young people who are being trafficked, but there's also the demand for it. So we look at this systemically. Certainly, any citizen can be a first responder. Next slide, please. We look into how teachers, your good professor, Professor Chauhan has stepped up in terms of supporting the change maker movement he's speaking to. Healthcare professionals come. A service worker. One of our initiatives is to leverage people like DHL, people and other service workers that go into communities every day to have an awareness to notice things that they might not have noticed before, that they can call out to address this issue. And certainly the media and social media can be leveraged. And then at the bottom where we're going to go now is that you, as youth, as students, can become first responders. You can do it through social media. You can do it through starting a club or joining a club like the Changemakers Club. You can work with informing and educating your families and the people around you. You can join networks. You can build a movement. You can do research papers. There's a whole range of things. And I'm sure that you're already highly involved in some of these spaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the slides down now, and I'm going to invite Prashant to come on and join us and maybe have a bit of a conversation. And then off the back end of that, maybe we can invite some of you, because we'd love to have some of your questions and comments as we engage in this conversation together. So Prashant, I'm going to invite you in. Is there anything that you're noticing that would be particularly valuable for us to engage in terms of the students here, the Changemaker Club, and how they can be even more engaged in terms of being first responders?
Yeah, I think you have covered very nicely the concept of the fellowship and the first responders very briefly and in a very informative manner. And I believe those who are attending now, all the students and the members of this club are taking a note, and they may be thinking about the ideas that how they can contribute more in that process. So that we will definitely going to discuss today. So in this conversation, because we thought this session should be more into a conversation side and more on the Q&A, so that you can also contribute and participate. So I think this is something which we want from today. And so I request all the participants, those who are students especially, that please uh, think and listen, and please carefully raise your hand if you have any query or anything you want to ask when we will start that Q&A session. So that will definitely help us also and you also to carry forward this movement this that we are trying to. Yeah, so Mike, I just want to start uh, this conversation with a note that, for example, can you just give us any brief about that how this fellowship journey started? What was the idea behind that? If you want to tell us something more on that.
Yeah, I think thank you. It's a great question because not only does it inform us about the fellowship journey, but I think it's it's born out of the same um, desire to have an impact as your change makers group. I'm going to guess like I think all the people are together. I don't care what age right now. We're people that look into the world and because we're compassionate, because we care, because we have a sense of purpose, because we want to reduce or end suffering. I think however, and there's a lot of ways we do that, right? And each one of us might have our different space. I know we're talking about human trafficking now, but you mentioned the change makers. It might be the environment, right? It might be poverty. It might be and so I really encourage everybody to kind of follow their sense of passion. So I don't have like. What's certainly clear here is the closer you get to the human trafficking issue, the harder it is not to feel compassion for. The closer you get face to face. And one of the things that we do with the Bridge Institute in our programs and in the fellowship, which began 4 years ago, is how do we bring people really face to face with the issue? And as you know, Prashant, when you were part of the fellowship, when we did it in person, is we literally went out and out in the cities and out and met with and connected with and we're face to face with primarily the young women. It's not just women, but mostly it's the young women who have been trafficked and what that life looks like and begin to understand the impact on their lives. But also we were immersed into it in terms of who are the people that are trafficking, what's their motivation, who are the people who are walking in and paying for those services, because getting inside an issue like this means we have to see it from all angles. And so the Bridge Institute, as I said, in its commitment to partner with, we partnered with the Kalinga Institute and found a very strong partner in this space. And really in that partnership and then inviting in other partners. So now we also have some corporate sponsors and partners that have joined us in this journey. And what we found is that we've gained momentum as we've gone over the last 4 years. What we've learned each year, we've leveraged in terms of doing some redesign of our program. We've gotten even more and more inside of the issue of human trafficking. And what that's allowed us to do is generate even clearer insights in terms of how we can have greater impact. As you know, this year, even though we don't have that opportunity, we didn't have the opportunity to gather physically, which what it did do, as you know, is it provided us with a chance to work with people globally on the issue and also bring in some new lenses. I mean, as you know, it's been very interesting to hear back from, how can big data and technology begin to really support us in this issue. I know it's something that your young people, we grew up in a time when big data and technology was not, it wasn't really something we had available to us. But now, that's part of what how do we leverage that? How do we take this lens of looking looking at it like that money has to move somewhere, right? That's a lot of money. And so how do we track that money? That money will then kind of lead us back to the source of where's the power here? I mean, effectively, we're looking at, how do we address this? But I think if we come back to students as first responders, we look at, there's such a range of opportunity. And again, those of you that are on the call, I invite you to notice, where does your interest go? Where does your passion naturally go into this space? And how would you like to contribute? Because I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do this. I think the key is get close enough to it to become educated. Find a way that it touches you. I think we have to be touched by the issue. Like, it can't just be a mental thing. It can't just be like, oh yeah, there's an issue out there, it's important. Because without it kind of getting into the place that it touches us, we'll tend not to move to action. We won't be motivated to move in a way. And I really believe that each one of us has to find the thing that naturally draws us in a way that we want to contribute. So I think I went a little bit off of what you originally asked me about the Kalinga journey, but I wanted to kind of bring it back to how it relates directly to some of the young people and the students that are on the call, and how it effectively, I tend to think, even though maybe they're not fellows in the journey with us, in this conversation, I'm like inviting them into this journey with us. And maybe you're inviting me in to be part of your change maker journey as well, right? So.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. I think you have given a clear idea about that. And definitely, it's not why I asked this question, because it's not about the fellowship or any program. Actually, it's about the message behind it and the reason behind it. Basically, the very serious problem, and which is not, we can take it as one aspect. If you see the sustainable development goals, when we talk about gender equality or reduced inequalities and various goals, when we link it up, so we feel that this is a very heinous crime, and which is flourishing, and you said like it's $1 billion industry, and definitely when we have this kind of thing, so very potential people are coming up, and they are working on all these aspects. So how to deal with them? So moving further, because the recent COVID is also one of the very biggest challenge, of the century, and even more than that. And I don't think that we have seen similar to that. So I'm just linking it with COVID-19 pandemic, that globally, even all the whether it is is basically where hello, yeah, so everywhere affected a lot. So it has affected a lot. So this is so I just want to take forward this with this problem, actually, because when we talk about human trafficking, so definitely we see it with the lens of the poverty also, because one poverty is one of the indicator or the reason, and then afterwards education and various other factors are also there. So in terms of if we are talking about first responders, and we are focusing on youth, for example. So what I believe, that definitely youths are, if we see the data of India, actually, as per the census, so globally, India is one of the youngest country, actually, where a good percentage of youth is present, and definitely they can act and respond to this problem along with others in a very better way, and in a very effective way, actually. Now the problem is, what I have seen, that they do not have clear understanding. They are not able to move further, or there's some lacking of guidance, and mentoring is there. So, Mike, can you just elaborate something on that? That when we talk about mentoring or the guidance, actually, so is there anything which any other globally you have seen, what students can do in this, or youth who is interested can join this, or they can contribute individually? If you can just throw light on this.
Well, I think I can, and I know that you broke up a little bit, but I think I think there's kind of two ways to think about this, which is, one is, can I join? Can I become part of and join something that is aligned with how I'd like to contribute? So something like a change maker club like you've created, but there's also other networks that are out there. If you do some research, there's places that you can become part of something bigger and contribute. So I think there is where do I want to join? Like where can I participate? Where can I join others in doing this so that we can collectively leverage our impact? And I think when we come together around this, we can leverage our impact because we can not only know that we are not alone in terms of our thoughts around this, but we have the collective knowledge of groups that come together. So I think one of the things I would say, again, you have your change makers group. And if those of you that have a particular passion in this area, I'm not going to go through and don't have time, but there are lots of organizations, lots of networks, lots of groups that are focused in this space. And finding one that feels like a good fit for you, I think is a great next action. The other one has to do with individual day-to-day action, because sometimes we can think about this and say, oh yeah, here's a policy for addressing this, or this is like, and it's like, well, what can I do today? What can I do today? And I think that's the individual accountability. And it's like, what can I do today? And it might feel like a small thing, but I'm a big believer that, maybe when I finish this call, I have a conversation with my 21 and 19-year-old and say, yeah, I just want to share you a little, because I live in a world that is not close to trafficking. Like I'm one of those people where it's easy to think like, oh yeah, that's a big problem, but if it's far away from me. And I think a lot of what we're into right now is how to bring it closer to people that say, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not part of my life, right? So I look at the two invitations to the people on our call, which is there some place you want to join others? And are there day-to-day actions, even small actions you can take from a place of being accountable and owning this? Because I'm a big believer that lots of small actions have a big impact.
Correct. Yeah. So I think definitely, and you very rightly said, because when you are looking any problem in a way, when you are not able to see it nearby, and then you are just reading or just visualizing, and when you are at a place where that problem exists, I think that is also one of the very important aspect. So like for example, right now students from India and from Nepal and nearby, especially the northeast area, they are joining this session today. So the kind of thing which we have seen is that each state has his own their own problems, and the demography and various challenges are there, and definitely the problems are also according to that. So the very important other aspect is this, that what I have seen, the student community or the youth, where what we are taking today is this, that the students are normally coming, taking education, and they are moving out from the university or any educational institution. So the thing is this, that which model we want to have, where we can have a network or connect with them continuously, actually. And that was the idea, that where we started this Change Makers Club, actually, because we thought that we do a lot of cultural activities, we do a lot of various other theater club and various things we have. So let's have something where we have some meaningful efforts should come up, and some constructive efforts should come up in a sustainable manner, which can where students can work with their creativity on any problem. And that's why this club was initiated 3 years back, and students very uh, enthusiastically participated and organized various events. Because when we see okay, by doing an online event, for example, there is different approach of people how they take anything, or talking how things will help. But I believe that what I have seen, that small efforts where people are at least for example, right now there are around 70 people are here, and others are watching on YouTube, for example. So what they can take a message from this session today, and how they can take forward momentum this. So that was the idea. So what I'm looking today with these this student community also, that when a student is passed out, so which model we are going to create in a manner where they are voluntarily taking up interest in working on human trafficking issues, and building a network of people, a mechanism where they are joined together. And like for example, as a university alumni, so we have alumni network. So if we are doing any initiative, so we share the information, we tell them. If they do something else, so they share with us. So how we can take forward this, because some may be joining NGOs, some may be working with any development sector in other UN agencies, or some other. So how to engage and have a productive system where they can contribute in a manner. I think that is something is also very important. So if you have anything to say or anything you have seen in further in this regard.
Well, uh, you know where my thinking went, Prashant, is
Yeah.
let's direct that question to the young people. So,
Yes,
I mean,
correct.
part of the thing we've talked a little bit about, but I actually believe they are more equipped to, is how do you create a framework that can grow? How can you some structure that brings us together, right? But it has to have the space that it can grow beyond itself. That great ideas have the space to grow. That you talk about change makers. It's like, how do you create a movement, right? How do you create a movement in this space? And the idea of a movement is it has to have space to move. So there's this notion of we have to have some structure around which we come together. We have a change makers club, so it has some structure and some agreement that we come together on, right? And yet somehow in that space needs to be the freedom that says, wow, I have a passion for this. I have this wild idea here. And there's a space for someone to take that and then move with it. And so the idea of this is where I'd almost take, you're asking me the question, I almost put it back on your students, because I
Yeah.
feel like they are more
Yes.
naturally, I mean, I'm not saying that us who are a little bit older can't think this way, but I'm just saying they were brought up in a world of technology and social media and stuff that is fluent, and this idea of co-creation and just a different mindset that. And so I would love, like your Changemaker Club and other, it's like, how do you experiment in creating enough framework that we can align around something and be together in it, but enough freedom in that so that as energy grows and possibilities grow and those visions expand and new innovation comes forward, that it creates a space for it to almost take a life of its own. Because I think when we do that, we then we leverage some of the information, but it's the inspiration that really moves people. It's being touched by compassion, and then it's inspiration for making a difference that moves people and draws people into the journey. So I'm not saying anything that you don't know, but I'm actually thinking that you and I are not the ones that have the conversation
Correct.
about it. It's actually the young people on the call who are going to be better at this than we are. So
Yeah. So I think Satya has written something. So Satya, can you just unmute Rijo? Can you just unmute Satya, and if you can just give a suggestion what he's writing on the chat, so that we can take this conversation further.
Hello.
yes, we can
Hi.
hear you.
Good afternoon to both of you. I just wanted to share that, I mean, systemic change often results from smaller movements and joint actions leading to institutional reform. So, I mean, as you guys are saying, it all begins with us. And once there's like a joint sort of drive and like a passion which is leading, a certain movement a certain way, it really picks up in terms of pace, and then it can cause great waves of change.
Uh, Thank you, Satya. So I couldn't have said it better, which is why I think that this conversation needs to move beyond Prashant and I and out to those of you that are in the middle of it. So, and I realize also some of the things we're saying, you're already doing. Like I realize that we have people and it's and this is where I think this interesting combination of what individually, what inspires me but then how can I also connect with others in this space? Because there's also something, as many of you know, that's so powerful about, when we bring our ideas together, it creates something that no one of us could have seen initially. So really appreciate you bringing that point forward, and couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions or thoughts
Yeah.
that we want to
Shaurya, I think just unmute Shaurya, please.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes, please.
So I just wanted to add to what Satya has said. I think that there is like too much of social stigma attached with the people who are involved in this, like the victims of human trafficking. When we talk about women or when we talk about children also, so regarding their past, there is too much of stigma in the society. And when in the context of India, if I say that most of the trafficking, it happens because of the poverty, because poor people, they generally sell their daughters for the sake of money. So like these kind of stigmas that are attaching to this human trafficking, we can address these things by hosting different types of behavior change programs, so planning these programs for the rural people, specific to the needs of the region where we are hosting it.
I love, is it Shara? Am I saying your name correctly?
Sure, yeah.
Shara, yeah, really appreciate what you're sharing. As we look at, particularly referencing in terms of behavioral shift. And that's, as you know probably better than I do, that's easier said than done. A lot of these things are deeply rooted in terms of well, first of all, you mentioned poverty, and Prashant mentioned that, coming off the back end of COVID, we're even dealing with more poverty, right, and more desperation. And at the heart of this is that. And then you talked about the stigma, and how in society, again, deeply rooted kind of belief systems that we all hold as human beings. And you mentioned that the shift, like that, even unconsciously, sometimes we can put people in categories, and not really appreciate their humanity, not really appreciate and honor they're a human being just like we are. And it's not that we don't care, but it's almost like we have these internalized beliefs unconsciously where we'll put, like we talk about the stigma, or we go into a place of saying, oh, well, gosh, it's such a big problem, there's nothing I can do about it. I also love the fact of you're talking about behavioral shifts, and then how do you tailor those to the local community, to the specific area? Because this is a complex problem. I don't want to imply there's a simple answer to this. It's a complex problem, and it requires lots of intervention across lots of different areas. And what I really appreciate is, how do we focus on the kind of core shifts in terms of behavior, and how do we tailor those programs to meet the specific needs of a particular community or particular area? Prashant, I don't know if you have any builds on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the point which Shaurya said, and even Satya, I think Satya, you want to say something before you've raised your hand?
I mean, I'd also like to add that I think there's also like an interdisciplinary approach, which is really important for this, because I mean, human trafficking is not only tied to it's not only tied to, let's say, poverty. It's also tied to like migration, for example. We learned a lot about it this semester. We're like, I think us as citizens, especially young citizens, I think we also have a right to just demand more from government agencies, because I mean, like fraudulent practices which have become normalized through years of unregulated management, as government bodies basically turn a blind eye, often result in, for example, migrants falling prey to entrapment, where they're kind of like coerced into some sort of recruitment agency. This often happens with Nepali migrants who have to go to other places, and they get they fall prey to entrapment, and then they just get stuck in this vicious cycle of debt and exploitation. So I think as just citizens, we also have a right to demand more, lobby more, and just like demand more regulated practices from government agencies.
What I really appreciate what you're saying, Satya, and I think it really sits in that empowerment place. It's like, how do we empower ourselves? And I think sometimes there's no question, to really step into the space as I see you are, is there's a level of courage. There's a level of willingness to kind of own this in a way and have the courage to actually, as you said, I expect more out of my public officials. I'm going to make a stand here, and I'm going to ask others to make a stand here, and the courage to take the action around something as important as this, because you're spot on. A very complex. You mentioned migrants. You mentioned poverty. We mentioned who are most susceptible. We mentioned desperation. Even families that sell their kids into slavery effectively, or trafficking, because they don't have food to eat on their table. I mean, so there's at the heart of this is our profound human issues. And then when we look at the heart of the solution, you obviously you're someone you're educated, you're motivated, so you have that awareness, you're engaged, and you spoke from empowerment. Like, how do we empower ourselves individually and collectively to take the action necessary to shift the system? And you're right, it's not going to shift overnight. It's going to be a lot of individual efforts, but I really appreciate you stepping into that space. Prashant, I don't know if you had any builds or thoughts.
Next, I think Supriya, can you just unmute and
Hi, sir. I think all my different college students have said very correctly that we have to focus on the victims. But I also think that the trafficking industry is nurtured by very mighty, powerful, and rich people. So there should be a capital punishment, that what we have seen in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, like years and years of trafficking is being done, and there are so many powerful people are involved, but only one person got convicted. So the conviction rate is really low, and we really need a very strong law, and we have to advocate corporal punishment for these kind of people involved in it. When people have fear, only then these kind of practices will stop, because you will stop one trafficker, there are thousands other will crop up somewhere else. And unless there is a fear, like capital punishment, I don't think so all the educating of the victims and the families will not suffice. It has to be a both way approach. It has to be a vice versa approach, that people who are involved should be getting a capital punishment, and people who are victim of it, they should have better education, better rehabilitation, so that they can live a life of dignity after coming out of these nexuses and rings. And even if as a single person, individual, I want to do something, because there are 10,000 powerful people involved behind it. So either the voice will be suppressed, or either the complaint will not be filed. I have seen it firsthand. One of my friend was involved in one with such victims. So they have to actually get into the all sort of power, political power, muscle power, to get the complaint filed against the person, because that person was politically very influential. So those kind of things actually demotivate people who are working for the rehabilitation, and encourage the perpetrators of these kind of issues. So I think, to sum it up, we need stronger laws as well.
I totally agree. And here's one thought I have. Again, a very complex issue, a big issue, and you touched on how sometimes it can seem so big that you almost want to give up on it, because one of the things that we talked about was, how do we shift people in power from being power over to being our partners? So there's also a lot of very powerful people who are good people. There's a lot of very powerful people who want to shift this. How do we make them our partners? And one of the things, as you know, as in my role as a consultant and a client director for Bridge, we work with people to the very top of some of the biggest global organizations. And one of the things we're really supporting are those organizations really embracing fully a sense of purpose and societal purpose as a core foundation of who they are as an organization. So if you begin to get some of these top CEOs or powerful people who are good people who want to address this, how do we leverage the power, so that we leverage the power of and the influence of those people to counter the power of that kind of negative power, that those people in power that are profiting from trafficking. So part of the approach and philosophy around addressing this systemically is also to leverage the people already in power who are good people who are already in power, to educate them and engage them in the journey so that they can influence whole networks, whole organizations globally around awareness and education in this space. And when we go there, we begin to see some level of balancing the scale of power in this area, but really appreciate what you brought forward. I'm aware that we're coming up on time or close to time, Prashant, so I want to respect that for you and for your students.
Yeah. So thank you. And I think very rightly Supriya pointed out this issue, because definitely this influence people, politically connected people, and there are many reasons actually behind this. So I think Anjali Singh also has written something. So Anjali would like to say something. Can you just unmute? Raise your hand, please.
Hello, good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. I said it is important to build consciousness, mainly awareness among youth before any step. Like it's important to to build our youth towards things which is concerning to today's world, like all the matters. We need to make our youth conscious. It's like we have seen our youth going towards different things, but we need to bring them back to a track, to make them aware, to make them conscious about changes which we need to bring, because we are the future. So this is what I highlighted, that consciousness is very important before anything. Like awareness is much important before taking any step towards anything.
Well, I'll say, Anjali, you're speaking my language. So I totally agree. Awareness and consciousness is at the foundation of every choice we make in life, whether it's about trafficking, whether it's about how we treat our friends or our family or our partners, or how we meet life. And when we go unconscious is when we get into trouble. And this is where I'm a believer that I'm going to totally reinforce what you just said, is that our first work is to be conscious, because all of us go in and out of being conscious and unconscious. And it's a daily practice to be conscious and aware, not just about trafficking, but about our own state. And when we can become conscious, when we can tune into and recognize where we can play a role, but also how we can empower ourselves to play that role, whether it's in trafficking or anything else we choose in life. So I'm a big believer that the foundation of everything else we do in life has to do with our process of staying conscious. However you do that, there's a lot of different methods for staying conscious, and kind of tuning in and recognizing, because one of the big things individually is, where do I go into denial? When do I go unconscious? When do I do things that have an impact I don't want to have? That's a very individual thing, but that also expresses this whole issue of trafficking. When are we in denial about it? When do we lose awareness of it? When do we disconnect from it? So the things that we work with individually reflect right back up to the broader issue of trafficking.
Yeah.
So I can
Yeah, I
probably,
think
I just want to say maybe time for one more, and then I'm going to need to probably
yes.
wrap up.
Yeah.
Yes. What I would like to say on the basis of what Anjali said, self-consciousness. For the initiative that an individual takes, it is dependent on many factors. So, I'll just give an example. If I have a consciousness about something, but my consciousness is based on the society which I'm surrounded with. So the people I'm surrounded with is what indirectly directs me. So like if I have a thought towards taking an action against something, or I find something as wrong, but the society around me does not want me to take a voice against it, so eventually they will suppress it. So there are many factors uh, related to an individual. When we are talking about an individual taking a step or having a self consciousness about one's own self and about others, we being a social animal, living in a society, we need the support and a collective effort of the whole society. Like, why I am saying it is because I have personally felt this, that if I have a strong conscious about something, I need to take some action against it, but the society eventually does not allow me to take that step, somewhere because it is based on their opposite belief towards it. So yes.
I really love what you brought forward is that we live in cultures with norms that are very powerful, right? And so and this is and I think we can never lose sight of the fact that, you know, we're influenced by the environment. And one of the things that over the course of their lives I shared with my kids was one of the most important things you can do is choose who are your friends. What's the environment you're in? Because you're spot on that if I spend enough time in an environment, I become that part of that environment. I become the thinking of that environment. I become assimilated into that thinking. That's why I think the power of getting yourself around people and creating little micro cultures, micro environments, you know, this change maker club or this certain network or organization. How can I spend more time amongst people who will empower me, who will support me, that together we can create a movement. You know, and that might be a movement within a broader space that maybe is pushing against it. But if the more you can come back into that space, because I do agree, while we have individual actions, it can be quite challenging to be in a culture or a broader system that might be in many ways pushing against us. So how do you find like-minded people, like-hearted people that you can join? So collectively you can create these little micro cultures, micro environments, and kind of push out and influence in the way that you can. And if we can create enough of those, or we can connect those, then we begin to have the opportunity to have a bigger impact. And I'm also a big believer that, you know, even if we don't see the outcome, every choice you make that's for the better has an impact. You know, and maybe I'll end our communication with, maybe you've heard the story, a little story. It's a story of someone walking along a beach, and there's lots of starfish. You know what starfish are? They're washed up on the shore, and maybe you know the story. It's an old story, and they're washed up on the shore. And this guy's walking along the beach, and he sees someone coming towards him, and this person would bend down and throw a starfish in the water, and then walk and bend down, throw another starfish in the water. And he got closer. He asked the guy, he goes, you know, so what are you doing? He goes, well, these starfish, if they stay up here on the beach, they're going to dry out and they're going to die. So I'm throwing them back in so they can live. And the guy said, well, but there's miles and miles of beach here. There must be hundreds, maybe thousands of starfish. Like, you know, how can you possibly make a difference? And he reached down and picked up one starfish and he threw it in the water, and he said, I made a difference of that one. And if you and your action can make a difference with one person's life, if one young woman is somehow rescued out of this, or one family is moved out of poverty, you've made a big difference. So my invitation is, yes, we are addressing this problem collectively, and we're working to have, but never underestimate what one action can do when you share it from your heart, from a place of compassion and from commitment and from the courage that you've talked about. So you impact one person's lives or one family's lives, you've made a big difference for those people. So never underestimate your opportunity to not only change the world, but also change the world for one individual or one family. And with that, I'm going to really thank you so much for being on the call. Thank you, Prashant, for inviting me, and all of you. And I really want to invite you to be change makers. Let's work on this together, and let's hold that vision of where the future can go.
Yeah, and I would like to acknowledge the presence of Rainy Jacob, Mr. Rainy Jacob, who is a Kalinga Fellow, and Mr. Aslam Khan, who is also here with us in this session. And many of the other people are watching on the YouTube. So thanks for coming. And all the students, those who participated today, I think they are very much interested. And maybe if you have any idea, you can share with us later and we can take forward. So I think now Rijo, Mr. Aslam, you want to say something here? Mr. Aslam Khan?
I just want to say thank you, Mike. It was nice to hear you in that kind of space, because otherwise we were just, you were listening and just pushing us, but now it's better. And I think the young people have spoken very well, and they have the, the bright idea that we can include in our projects also, in our approach also. So thanks to Prashant ji for organizing this wonderful, energetic space. And I think we'll move forward from this. Thank you again, Mike and Prashant ji. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to acknowledge one presence of one faculty from Christ University. So she is also Nagateng Lang Teryang. She's also very much interested in working on human trafficking. So most welcome. You can connect with us anytime. So thank you so much. Now, Richo, I think it's your turn now. Yeah.
So the duty that is bestowed upon me is to give the vote of thanks.
Your voice is little slow, actually, Richo.
Can you hear me, sir?
No, but it is little low.
Okay. One second.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah. So, firstly, I would like to thank our esteemed speaker for the day, Mr. Michael. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, sir. We hope that together we can build a better future for the coming generations and to the existing generations as well. People like you in the society who took an initiative are really valuable than any other precious gold or silver or anything. Uh, a huge thanks to you, sir. Secondly, I would like to thank Prashant R Chauhan, sir, for all your guidance, for all your initiatives, and for trusting upon us, for relying upon us, and for taking initiative towards empowering the youth, because sir is definitely uh, really interested towards engaging the youths, molding the youths, and his whole life itself is with the youths. So uh, being in the midst of youths, he has taught us that we can do many things and how we can utilize them in a very better way. Thank you, sir, for everything. uh, I would like to thank all our faculties, the HOI ma'am, and all the other Kalinga Fellowship like esteemed people who joined our session. And I would like to thank Supriya for the good, vibrant introduction that she gave about Michael sir. And especially the last, all the participants, because without you, it is never a success. So based on your participation, it was fruitful. So the farmer has spreaded the seeds within us, and now it is our time to grow. We need to grow. Small initiatives need to be taken, small steps need to be taken. uh, so we need to take actions towards change, as Mahatma Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. So we need to be the changes that we expect the society to be like. So with that, thank you all.
Yeah, and thank you, Rijo, for all the technical help. He's the man who is behind the show of Zoom technical thing. So thank you so much. Yeah, Mike, you want to say something at the end? Now we are, yeah.
Just really a pleasure, really, and thank you for the invitation. And I'm very excited about what you as young people, caring young people with a vision for the future. Never underestimate the impact you have, even if you can't always see it. Every choice that you make, every individual choice that you make, an action that you take, whether it's in trafficking or poverty or anything that you do that comes from compassion and caring, makes a difference. Every day that you do that, you make a difference. So it's really been a privilege and pleasure to be with you. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And those who are watching us on other platforms, be connected and share your ideas with us. We will definitely take up. And those who are not able to speak today, you can write to us. We will accommodate your suggestions and be in touch. And till the time